Hope everybody can hear me okay. Coming to you live from Seattle. Welcome to the chart webinar series. We have approximately 61 folks online, so we want to welcome you all from wherever you are calling from. We have a couple of folks here that are going to be co-facilitating with you for today. But just a couple of housekeeping items. We are going to be taking a couple of polls today, as well as maybe asking for your responses in the chat room. So please feel free to open up that section on your control panel. First of all, I'll introduce myself. I am Kurt Archambault, Vice President of People and Performance Strategies. I will be spending a good portion of the day with you. Also on the panel will be Jen, Swan, and Melissa. So Jen, if you want to tell a little bit about yourself, go ahead.
Hi there. Yes, hopefully everybody can hear me. I am the Senior Director of People Development with First Watch Restaurants, and we have roughly 300 restaurants nationwide. And I've been with the company for about 3 years, and I am a longtime member of CHART. Melissa?
Hi, everybody. This is Melissa Doolan-Caney with TDN2K, and TDN2K stands for Transforming Data into Knowledge. I am a huge fan of CHART, have been going now to the conferences and participating, I dare I say, almost 15, 20 years now. So it's been a long time. I'm really proud to be a partner of CHART for a long time too. Under TDN2K is the People Report, which a lot of you are members of and are familiar with. And we are really proud to be a partner in creating some really great dialogue and insights on training and HR practices in the restaurant industry. And you'll notice a little bit personal about myself is that you'll notice my Twitter handle is Lover of Guac. Yes, I am a huge lover of guacamole. Feel free to tweet me out and Jen and Kurt along this hour as well if you have any questions. But you can also ask them in the question bar here as well.
Excellent. So we are coming to you from all points of the U.S. I'm here in Seattle, Jen's in Florida, and Melissa is in Texas, and then we have Central Nerve Center up in New Jersey. So our fingers are crossed that everything is going to work exceptionally well today. So it's hard to believe that it's been almost 6 months since we were in Charleston and had the opportunity to present this information to the attendees there. I know some of you may have participated in that. And we're going to go ahead and hopefully review some information from that session, but also have some new information. So, Jen, I think you might be in charge of the polls. So can you go to our first poll, which is how are we feeling? As you can see in 2016 in the past, we were fairly optimistic, but let's see where we are today. So if you could take a moment, for those of you online, and go ahead and tell us where you feel and it says the second half of 2016. What I'd like you to do is think forward. Let's go ahead the first half of 2017. Where do you think your company's performance will be? Is it moving upwards and continuing that upward trajectory? Are we basically staying on track, or is it going to be a bumpy ride? So take a few seconds, make your choice, and we'll see what the pulse of today's attendees are. Let's see, anybody taking the poll?
Are you guys able, so Kurt and Melissa, are you seeing the poll results coming in as they're being done?
I do not. I only see.
I see them. It looks like. Yeah, if you're not able to see them, it looks like 58% or 59% are saying that the only view they have is up. 20% is saying they're keeping the wheels on track, and 22% is saying it's going to be a bumpy ride, or 23% now. So very interesting results, because I know we asked the same question at the conference back in July, and it looks like it's changed a little bit.
Yes, as we can imagine, this last couple of months has created a lot of interesting views of the world, and so it's good to see that though we are still, at least with this group, similarly optimistic. though some of us have moved a little bit to the more pessimistic side. So let's just say hang on. But we've got some great information, and this is going to be new. And Melissa, if you can kind of tell us where we are now through Q3 of 2016, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Kurt. Very interesting perspective too is that I think the gap widened on how many people are feeling good about where we're moving, and it also widened on how many people are feeling like it's going to be a little bit more of a bumpy ride. So less people feeling in the middle. So maybe we really are that country divided here, our industry divided. I'm going to present you some data that comes from TDN2K. Just so you are familiar with TDN2K and the information that I'm presenting, give you a little context here, is I'm going to be presenting people report data that tracks over 2 million employees on a monthly basis. It's roughly 1 in 8 employees in the restaurant industry. All of our data does come from the restaurant industry. We do have some insights that came from the chart poll that we did last year. And highly encourage you, and we'll probably say it 3 or 4 times on this webinar, to participate in the upcoming survey that we're going to be publishing in March. So there's some data that's coming from that, as well as our company Black Box Intelligence that tracks and analyzes operational and financial data on a weekly basis and represents about $64 billion in sales. So just wanted to give you perspective that this is a really great kind of pulse check on what's happening in the restaurant industry. We'll be talking about hotels as well as we go through this. So overall, we are feeling a soft economy. We're feeling it in our numbers. These are sales and sales trends for the last year here. And you're seeing overall the industry is down. We're not down significantly, but we are down. And that's really in fast casual, family dining, and casual dining, and fine dining. We're seeing a little bit of an uptick in the upscale. And quick service is actually our darling of our industry. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go through this. But we're looking at Q4. Q4 looks like it's still going to be a strong quarter for quick service, as well as a little bit of a softer sales and traffic for our other segments.
Awesome. So we see some movement within the industry, but before we go to this slide, Jen, can we launch the poll?
We sure can.
Yes. So as we saw before in the poll, we have some shifts a little bit in our confidence, a little bit more optimistic, a little bit more pessimistic, fewer people in the middle. We've seen some downward trends in some of our segments, though quick service seems to be moving up. As you can see, what do you think is impacting you the most? Consumer confidence, rising labor, employee shortage, and where's the traffic? And we are seeing some numbers come in, about 46% voted. Where's the traffic seems to be leading into the clubhouse. I all of a sudden feel like a horse racing announcer.
That's what I was just going to say.
37%, we still have a large number around employee shortages. 17% currently on rising labor costs. Consumer confidence, interestingly, is at 7%. So we'll give a little bit more time for the voting. Votes are still coming in. 70% of the precincts have reported. We are seeing, employee shortages is rising. But I think we're starting to get the experience here of those downward trends. The traffic is not coming in, and we've seen that with Melissa's previous slide. And so that, coupled with employee shortages, seem to be going back and forth. But the traffic issue is significantly higher. So, Jen, I think we can go to the next slide just to show where we were back 6 months ago. The other direction. There we go. So just as we're looking at this now, employee shortage seems to have taken about a 10% drop in related to this audience, whereas traffic has jumped up significantly. So we are experiencing, at least with this audience, a downward trend in traffic, whereas consumer confidence has dropped slightly. Rising labor cost seems about the same, 16% versus 20%, but there's been a shift from that employee shortage to where is the traffic. So the good news is Melissa has some updated information for us to kind of talk about some of these issues related to both employee shortages and traffic drop. So go ahead, Melissa.
Sure. If we could forward the slides, talk to the next slide here. And Kurt, you're doing a great job with these quick polls. I wish you could have been around on election night to do it for me personally.
Maybe that'll be my night job. I'll do that.
Oh, it looks like we're stuck on the quick poll, but I wanted to talk to you a little bit about kind of the 3 things to know right now and what we're seeing from our perspective. So it's been interesting when we're looking at who's reporting to us. 62% of the brands that reported to us in Q3 are reporting negative same-store sales growth. So that traffic problem is definitely an issue that everyone's feeling, and it's impacting sales. When we asked this, just for context, in Q1 it was 50%. So we're moving up. The pinch is feeling a lot more of our restaurant companies, and we're seeing that overall. When we look at the average cost of turnover, which I think really impacts everybody here on this phone call today, we're seeing that increase too to over $2,000 per hourly restaurant employee. So we're seeing sales and traffic kind of dip. We're seeing a turnover go higher, the cost of turnover go higher, and then to kind of impact that, the personal income growth and job pros are slowing down year over year. So not the best of news here, but we're going to kind of talk about there's some best in class happening, and there are some people that are, despite all of this, that are still operating well.
And one of the questions we asked back in July was, what is the biggest concern facing our industry out of all these challenges? And as you can see, in July, a really large percentage of our participants said it's, the people component, the turnover and retention. My guess, and we did not include a poll on this particular one, but with the changing traffic patterns, this number may be potentially a little bit lower, and the emphasis is going to be more about driving business. But we all can agree that turnover and retention is a huge impact on our organizations, and other things are encroaching: minimum wage, benefit costs, recruitment. Some of you may have been very, very proactive with the overtime regulation changes, FLSA. As we all know today, that's been kind of put on hold for a moment, so we're not going to talk a lot about that particular aspect on this call, but turnover retention still remains to be our #1 primary concern. And I think, Melissa, you have some new data from recent information that you'd like to share with us as well. Or is this Jen? I think this is Jen.
Yeah.
Yep, and I think, Kurt, you pretty much just covered it right there. With back when we first did this poll, we saw a lot of people that were very concerned about the FLSA regulation changes. And probably many companies out there were scrambling because these changes were going to be in effect as of December 1st. And we're not going to get into them, but I do think that now even more so, people are starting to worry about, okay, what about turnover and retention? So we're going to really focus on that. Some of the FLSA regulation changes have kind of stalled out for the time being.
When we're talking about what we're looking at in criteria of when we're hiring employees, I think this was really fascinating to me, is that we talk about how hard it is recruiting and turnover and retention being a big issue. And I think that's going to continue to feel that in 2017. I really do. But this was something that we look at, is what are we hiring for? What really matters when we're hiring people? And when we ask people what's the most important criteria when hiring employees, that past experience is more than half. It's 53%. And then past experience, regardless of industry, is 35%. And then this other piece is 12%. And we've said this a lot, is, are we hiring for the right things? Is a culture fit important to us? Are we expanding beyond just looking at those resumes and saying, okay, they've worked in a past restaurant, hire them? Are we looking at more than that? And I think from a training perspective and working in HR, this is a really important question to ask internally. What are we looking for, and are we looking for the right things that are going to stick a little bit further? And when we talk about turnover, that's going to become even more important. Are we hiring the right people?
Yeah, that's right, Melissa. So for me, I work with First Watch restaurants, as I mentioned earlier, and First Watch is a breakfast, brunch, and lunch restaurant. So, we're open each day from 7 to 2:30 in the afternoon, and we're kind of a rising niche out there, very specific to breakfast and lunch and healthy items on our menu. And so, when I look at this and I see all these, individuals who say, I'd rather have someone with past restaurant experience, a lot of times we look at it as we really want people that fit our culture really well. Being that we open our restaurants bright and early in the morning at 7 a.m., we want people who are morning people because, we don't want to spend our time hiring someone who may have awesome experience, who's worked down the road at another restaurant forever, when we can have someone who loves being up early in the morning. It fits in well with their lifestyle. What's nice about us is that most of the people that work for us are in and out in the late afternoon, so they can go home and be with their families, and that's a great selling point for us. And so we get a lot of individuals that come in and interview for the position, and we'd much rather have someone who has a great personality, who wants to give back and kind of mold them into what we need them to be, versus someone who comes with 20 years of experience at the local diner down the road.
Yeah, and I think the key takeaway for me on this one is we are working with a diminishing pie. We keep asking the same people to work within all of our restaurants, and so they just basically go from restaurant chain to restaurant chain, from independent to independent. And what we need to look at is how do we grow the pie. And Melissa, you brought in some pretty interesting data around who is in our workforce that I think you have on the next couple of slides.
You are right, Kurt. So we, the old age, and I remember attending my first chart conference years ago, and the conversation was, what do we do with the up-and-coming workforce? And I think we should always challenge ourselves and talk about that, but I think it's also important to look at the facts and figures of who's in the workforce. This is a great slide that we received from Women's Food Service Forum in their partnership with us. And it looks at who is out there in the workforce. And if you look at it, it is pretty evenly placed between baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, and Gen E. So I think, we continue to talk about millennials and Gen Z in the workforce, but there's a lot more than that in the workforce. And are we really paying attention to the entire playing field here? And what do you guys think, Jen and Kurt? You guys can kind of probably talk to it from a training perspective on this. Is how does this impact? Because I know this is a really hot topic for you guys.
Yeah, for me, being in the restaurants and working with different generations, it is interesting because we seem to put a lot of stress right now on the millennials and what their expectations are when they come on board with a new job. And there's definite truth to that. We're seeing a big trend in more micro-learning type things, more technology, anything that kind of represents what the younger generations are seeing when they're on their phones or on their computers. So we tend to then jump on board with whatever trend is hot right now, and I smile because I see these catchphrases like micro-learning, which is really big right now. But I think inevitably, as Melissa was saying, all these generations, surprisingly for me, they're all taking part in our industry. And so having that well-rounded sense of what we need to give them. And bottom line, it's going to be that face-to-face interaction and training with others. That's never going to go away. At least in my mind, I don't think it will. What do you think, Kurt?
Yeah, and based on the fact that I now represent that large 24% gray bump towards the right, the key takeaway for me is we have to recruit and go after, and again, look at individuals across all age groups, and as trainers, recognize that those individuals may have different learning styles, and we can't exclude a certain population. We're all struggling for the same folks. And I just recently read an article that talked about millennials and specifically the food service industry, in that many of them are opting out, that they're not looking at food service as an option at any age, that they are moving towards going to college, which is amazingly enough what they've been told since they were young. So we really have to open up our spectrum. And on the next slide, you'll see kind of some great overlays to what Jen just said, is when we look at our learning, it really has to be that active plus blended learning combination, because each generation learns differently, but we need to find that sweet spot, and we don't want to exclude any particular generation as we are trying to bring them aboard and assimilate them into our cultures, and that's whether they've had restaurant experience or not. So I think this is a really good takeaway slide for trainers to recognize as they start building training strategies moving forward in the next 3 to 5 years.
Hey, just real quick, I think we had a question about what that last slide was. Was that for the restaurant industry or all? And I wanted to make sure I answered that. So that previous slide was for all working. So it's not just the restaurant industry. I know we consider ourselves very special, and we are different. We are a lot more manual labor, so we tend to lean towards a younger generational workforce. But when we go back to looking at what our biggest challenges are, and we don't have enough employees to fill our restaurants right now, which is happening, are we ignoring a large group that we could be recruiting? So I will say from our people report data, we show that about 70% of our workforce in the restaurants are the millennial age. So that cannot be discounted, and it is important to learn. But we thought it would be good perspective to look at all of this, and especially from that blended learning piece as well, which we were just covering.
Yeah, I definitely would add here that we want to go, I like what Melissa said about trying to go out and target some of these other generations that are out there. And although millennials might make up that 70% of who we have, again, it's this idea of active and blended learning to find out really what it is that they want to know. And some people, they're all individualized. So some people, you might think that, they're just video learners or they're technology learners, but there's so many different ways that we nowadays are expected to also teach even millennials, being able to have that eye-to-eye contact and that personal service that we expect for all of our customers coming in. And at First Watch, we get a lot of generations that come into our restaurants. So while we may be more heavy on the millennial side, I can tell you that especially here in Florida, we have a lot of snowbirds, and so we have a lot of the older generations that are coming into our restaurants. So it's also that interaction that they have with the multiple generations that I think is a really key point going forward.
Great. So the next slide is interesting too, is that we are actually seeing the job growth slowing down. And I thought this was important to keep in perspective, because we ask on a quarterly basis our recruiters, how hard is it to find employees? And we have seen numbers that we have not seen in years of how difficult it is to find people. So I think it's interesting. We're having a hard time finding people, and we're also seeing the growth slow down. So it might ease a little bit of tensions going into 2017 with this drop-off. I'm going to be interested, and we're going to be following our Q4, which seems to be a little bit of a higher job growth. It'll uptick, but I thought it was important enough to share this, and what we're seeing is that you kind of see this big dip here, and I think it's indicative to what we're seeing in sales and traffic. So we're seeing sales and traffic decline, and we're now starting to say we're having declining sales and traffic. We're having a harder time finding employees. We're just going to slow it down here and see how we do. So Q4 will be a big teller for us in how this is going to look for 2017. So annual turnover here, these numbers are fairly painful. And I can tell you, working for TDN2K for 13 years, these numbers are very high compared to others. And I would be interested for you guys to share your comments if you're feeling the same thing. Are you feeling this? And just what I had mentioned in the previous slide is that it's slowing will impact turnover as well. But you see quick service hourly employees is at 150%, and restaurant management is at 55%. This is a hard time to operate, and this directly impacts you guys as trainers. And I'd be interested, Jen, what are you feeling and seeing? And then, you know, I know we have some comments from the hotel industry back at the conference. So is there anything else that you think would impact the restaurant or the hotel industry that's worth noting here?
Yeah, you know, I spent about 8 years on the hotel side of hospitality as well. And when we were at our Charleston conference here, you know, we posed this question out to all of our hotel folks in the audience, and they're seeing a lot of the same similarities, which is, you know, sometimes with the labor shortage, you know, people kind of move on a little bit more quickly. And so our main responsibility here is to make sure that these individuals that come to work for us are happy that they've made that decision. We're going to go a little bit more into what impacts that when they come on board with us. But it is alarming to see these numbers, and it's very scary for individuals like us who need to make sure that our training is very consistent when turnover happens.
It's a challenging time for everybody, that is certain. When we look at is it for everybody? And I think when you look at those numbers, they scare you. But there are some areas that we're seeing hourly turnover actually become lower. And you see that green, and we're looking at counter service versus table service. For counter service, that includes quick service and fast casual segments, and table service is casual dining and above. I always think this is very interesting to look at when you see that bright green on the western states. That's also the area where you saw minimum wage increase. So there might be some more stability there because people are, the increase is happening. We're also seeing income levels increase on those areas as well. So sales and traffic are not as impacted as highly as well.
All right. Well, I can add to this map as well. Is you know, I look at it, and I'm here in Florida. You know, so I see you know, the green as far as Florida is concerned is, but you know, a benefit that we have here is, you know, we get a lot of the tourism traffic, and a lot of times when people are here on vacation, they're spending more time going to the more table service type restaurants when they're here. So, Kurt, did you have anything to add?
No, I think it's interesting as we know where the economies are going within the states. You know, the center part of the United States has struggled recently with the changes in oil and all of that, and it's not unusual to see that with their sales down, turnover is going up. Where the sales are robust on the coast, turnover seems to be down. I think our challenge is how do we not get into this feast or famine mindset from an employee standpoint and kind of keep an even keel during the peaks and valleys. You know, we asked in July what percentage of hourly workers that leave within the first year of employment was kind of leading into when are they leaving, and as we looked at it, 71% of the folks, which was the correct answer, was they're leaving early on in the first year of employment. We lose a majority of our folks in that first year, and we've got to try to figure out how to stem that tide, especially knowing that they're not going to high tech. They're not leaving us to go into other careers. They're leaving us to go to the restaurant up the street, which is a self-defeating process. So we've got to keep our folks, then we've got to bring in new people into our industry to help us solve these challenges. So, as we move into, terminations by tenure, Melissa, it's got some good information here that we recently updated.
Yeah, and I know somebody asked, are we looking for in 2017? And I'm going to be honest with you on all of these. You saw the hourly turnover change, I think, in 2016. And I'm going to go back to that because I think we're all scratching our heads and wondering what 2017 will look like. Wish we had a crystal ball here. We do work with an economist, Jill Neroff, who's here at TDN2K, who helps and advises our members on some of these things. And I think what his prediction was at the beginning of the 2016 year, and I think he was pretty spot on, is it's not going to be a great year, but it's not going to be a horrible year. And I think we all kind of feel that way. I mean, sales and traffic are down, but we're not like, the sky is falling. Some of us are, but I think when we look at it, the difference in hourly turnover and what we're seeing, I think it's really going to change now that we have FLSA kind of on hold. It's going to be an interesting ride because you saw California and those western states that did take a minimum wage increase. What I can tell you is those are also the ones that have that lower turnover. They're also the ones that have more spending coming into their restaurants and have better sales and traffic. So with that not happening as much, and we see more where minimum wage is not going to be increased, we will see how that impacts in 2017. So I think that's important. The hourly terminations for tenure, though, we're seeing this more and more, and it's increased more and more year over year, is that 71% of all hourly terminations have happened with less than 1 year. And I think that is a trend that we'll continue to see. We're, more part-time workers than ever before in this industry. We've moved from full-time to part-time. They are leaving over a quarter or 10 cents more an hour. Their time is precious. We demand a lot of people. A lot of the things that we've talked about, I know Jen has some great examples from her company on flexibility in the workplace and how to tackle that. But I don't see these numbers changing that much within those first 90 days or less than a year until we start making some monumental changes as an industry. Jen and Kurt, anything that you want to add to that?
No, I think you hit it on the head. I've been in this industry for a long time, and that number has been pretty standard for as long as I can remember, that the majority of our folks leave in the first 90 days.
Yeah, and I think it gets again back to just the type of culture that you have in your hotel or restaurant, and really understanding that this is the sticking point. Like the first 90 days, it's when people most likely are going to give up. And so if we don't give them that warm feeling of you made the right choice to come here, and for me especially, because again, I'm a breakfast place, if that alarm clock goes off at 5:30 in the morning and those individuals are like, yeah, no, I just don't feel right in this environment, then it's less likely that we'll be able to keep them. And obviously, we also want them to feel like they have a sense of belonging, because that's what everybody wants. So in that first 90 days, it's just so important to make sure that we are reaching those expectations that they have when we come on board. And I think sometimes we just have kind of a standard way of training or a standard way of onboarding, and we just expect that, again, that one size fits all, and that's not necessarily the case.
So what is this costing us? We asked this question, and what we saw is that this has increased over the last time we asked. So hourly is about $2,000. dollars, and management is $13,523. So when you're looking at those QSR numbers of 150% in turnover, and I saw a few comments of people, telling your operators and your general managers and putting it into context of every time we lose an employee, it's like $2,000 walking out the door. When you start to put that mindset into the operators where it's not this typical churn and burn, I think it's a different conversation. And as trainers, this is really important that when you're talking to operators and when you're talking to your employees of, hey, this all costs money. Every time we lose somebody after we've trained them, we've already invested into them. We've invested over $2,000. We can't lose them.
Yeah, and I would agree with you, Melissa, that we're preaching to the choir a little bit here. As trainers, our responsibility is to be educated on this information, but then to transition that education to our operators who respond in a different way. And some of them are more focused in on the bottom line. So we have to connect that people component to what their bottom line is. And we all heard the sayings over and over. People don't leave companies; they leave supervisors. So the question is, where's the challenge? And it is certainly store management. And remember, that store management can be the GM all the way down to that shift supervisor who's running my shift. So they all need to recognize the impact of their actions and what it means to the business. And that's our role as a trainer. We talked a little bit about what is the percentage. We asked the audience what percentage of the hourly turnover cost is attributed to training. This was the results, and then Melissa, you were able to tell us the exact number, which is on our next slide.
Right, and this comes straight from the survey that we did with Chart back in 2015, which we will be launching in 2017 of March. Just a reminder to make sure that you participate so you can get the results first. But we saw that the money goes for hourly employee into training 57%, 19% of replacement costs, and 24% is separation costs, where management is 64% is because of training.
Yeah. So as trainers, that should give us a lot of impetus to go out and communicate this, because that's dollars being unrecouped. We don't get our money back. We're losing them within the first 90 days. They're not returning on that investment, so those dollars don't come back. And we feel as trainers, we're kind of on the treadmill. And so we have to work with our operators and partner with them to help them recognize that energy and effort that they're going forth is an investment, that we need to keep those employees longer in order to pay off on that investment.
Yep, absolutely. And we all, again, this is like preaching to the choir, but we all know that when times are tough or sales or traffic are down, a lot of times it's the training or the number of hours that we spend on orientation, which can be impacted, because suddenly it becomes a quick, we need to get them on the floor, we need to get them out there, we need to get them working. And we want to make sure that we're spending the right amount of time to benefit the training that we are, we're paying money to train them, so we might as well take as much advantage as we can during the time that we have. So this here was just information on, orientation, and the median number of hours that are offered should be about 3 hours, but the most frequent response, 28% of the companies said about 2 hours.
So how much does that cost us? So when we looked at orientation time, we also looked at the turnover numbers. So when people said that they do more than 4 hours, what was their turnover compared to others? And we saw a huge difference in turnover for those companies offering 4 or more hours of orientation. And these are real dollars. If you look at hourly employees and you look at that $2,000, is it really hurting when you're trying to do the right thing and kind of get them up and working, missing out on that 4 hours of orientation? Are you missing where your turnover is actually going up because you're not getting them integrated into your company and keeping them a little bit longer?
Yep. I was just going to mention that, again, here, just spending that time doing it right, and then having a true system in place for, again, what you need to cover with those individuals as they start out within your organization. Because if anything is left off the table or they don't understand, that's when the confusion really sets in, and they're not sure if they're happy with the decision that they made. So, you know, I know at First Watch we do a lot of things where we try and involve that individual with the other employees so that they get to know the new people just as much. There's a lot of fun ways that you can do that as well. But I think you all know that when you do like an opening for us, when we do new restaurant openings, the teams tend to bond really quickly because they're all brand new and they're all in that same situation. But when it's a brand new person coming into to possibly a business that's been around for a while, that's a really tough thing to be able to feel comfortable in. And so our orientation and training has to be spot on.
Yep. And if you're looking to, you know, again, we're arming you with data to take back to your operators, you know, and use those differences in turnover. Look at your highest turnover restaurant or location and what they're spending on training and how well they're doing versus your best in class, and then do the math with them and say, you know, if we believe this number of $2,000, let's do how many people you've lost. That's this big a dollar. What could you have done with that money in your organization? What impact on your bonus did that have? And just really kind of play that mathematical game with them. I think you'll get a lot of attention. So we talked about the average amount of ongoing training for hourly employees at 12 hours. Melissa, did you have any additional information to add on that? I think that's pretty much the same as we had in July. Did I lose everybody?
I know. I'm wondering if we lost Melissa.
Oh, no, I'm here. I'm sorry. So I think when we look at the 12 hours, then if we go to the next piece, is more training for hourly equals lower turnover. So we looked at those that did more than 10 hours and those that did less than 10 hours, and there was 11% difference. So I think somebody quoted that there's not that much of a change in the last one, and you might make the same comment in this. 11% in a company of lowering turnover is a lot of money, and it is significant, especially when we look at best in class versus worst in class. I would argue that there's not that many companies that wouldn't love to lower their turnover by 11% and not celebrate that. So I think these are big numbers, and they're big dollars and they're real dollars. So when we're looking at best in class, we look at those differences, and they turn into real money that is really important to share with your team so they know the impact that it really makes on the business.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, and we can go ahead and launch our next poll. You know, part of this with the changes in our traffic patterns, you know, it's really about putting your money where your mouth is. So we have our poll.
I know, hold please. What's happening to your training budget? Got it.
Thinking about what's happening to your training budget. So based on what you've heard, we should be in budget season, or you should have recently reduced or finished budget season. What's looking like for 2017? Is it going up? Is it staying the same? Is it going down? I don't even know if I have a budget. You know, what do we got going on here? So with the audience polling in, interestingly enough, we're running about equal. 26%, 24%, 30% showing increase, 30% staying the same, 20% being, I'll have to get back to you on that budget. I'm not sure if there's one available. We are seeing
68%.
Yeah, so we're seeing a large number, and if last July we had 8% that said their budget was decreased from last year. It looks like going into 2017, about 22% of you said it's going down. 30% stayed the same, 30% increase, so that took a big drop from 45%. So it looks like we're going to have to do more with less, which is pretty atypical of our industry. When the first headwinds hit us, you know, we go into slash and burn mode. So as trainers, it's our responsibility to really paint that picture to say how important these limited dollars are, and they cannot be wasted. And hopefully we'll then be able to show and demonstrate how those more effectively used dollars then generated revenue, whether in top line or cost savings through better performance in food cost or labor management. So looking at the next slide, Melissa has some information for us that she can share.
Yeah, so this is from last year's results. Again, this will be going out in March, so we can have some updated materials here for you guys when you participate. But we're seeing 66% of companies said that they were increasing their training budgets this past year, and 58% of companies expected it to increase. So interesting, going from 2015 to 16 and going into 2017. Just with this group that's on the call right now, it looks like 2017, we're seeing more people actually decreasing their budget. So we've been pretty robust in the last couple of years. Looks like we might be feeling a little bit of softer results going into 2017. If you guys are with what you guys responded with.
Yeah, and Melissa, there was a question that came in regards to ongoing training in that 10 hours, and the question was, are we talking 10 hours ongoing in a year, a month, a quarter?
Yeah, so that was, I believe that was the annual number.
Okay, thank you.
So
we have this
money being spent.
Yep, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
You got it.
I'm going to ask the question, the money being spent, and this is from our report back in 2015, and it'll be interesting to see if this has changed. But you see the majority of our training money is being spent at back of the house and unit level management. And then hotel and lodging, you look at that unit level front of the house, really is the winner there.
Yep. So as we look back to July, one of the things we talked about is, are we as trainers, are we part of this budgetary conversation in our company? And as you can see then, with that audience of around 200-ish plus folks, 56% yes, 44% no. So based on what your role is within your organization, you may not have a direct impact on that conversation, but I would say that, especially if you're a field trainer, somebody out there, you may have the pulse of what's going on in operations, and you should be feeding that information back up to the leaders of the training department so that they can have that conversation when it comes up in the budgetary standpoint. So even though you may not be directly involved, you are indirectly involved, and so really make sure that we're sending that message to the people that need to hear it the most, and back it up with data. I'm a big fan of the data. So, Melissa, you pulled together, Jen, you pulled together some information in regards to, how does this pay off?
Yeah, absolutely. So the whole point here is that, the more money that we spend on certifying our trainers, the better our turnover numbers will decrease. So we want to make sure we're spending that money. I know, again, using my world as an example, at First Watch, we do a lot of train the trainers. And, when I came on board, we had about 111 restaurants, and in just 2.5 years' time, we're at 300 restaurants. And obviously, when that happens, you worry about the culture being diluted, and you worry about whether or not everyone understands exactly what it is that they should be doing. So as we do restaurant openings, first of all, we do a big vetting process on who is hired in to do our training. And then we plan for train the trainers every time. So even if these trainers have, been around and have done 20 plus openings for us, we still spend time making sure that they are all on that same page. So, and we also look for, again, restaurants with those solid trainers in place for, again, ongoing development of our employees.
And here's the payoff. So, Melissa, this is new information from since July, correct?
Correct. One of the things that we love to do here at TDN2K is look at top and bottom performers, and I think this is really interesting to look at. A lot of people look at, are we doing okay? Are we average? And in this economy, how can you perform really well? So we looked at our top performers in black box intelligence. So these are companies that are outperforming their segment in sales and traffic. So they're beating out the competition. And then we looked at the variance in hourly and management turnover, and there's a huge difference and a huge gap from those that are super successful in sales and traffic and their turnover numbers. So we're looking at that number of $2,000 and close to $14,000 and what it costs to turn over employees. But we're also looking at it, what are we losing at the table when it comes to sales and traffic? And we find that companies that are really paying attention to that turnover and really treating their employees right, really focused on training, they're seeing a huge difference. So I think it's really important to keep this in perspective. It's quick. We're easy to say as sales and traffic are down, let's cut expenses on the employee side. But I really think the companies that are doing it well are steady and keeping the pace, and you're seeing that in their turnover numbers and their sales and traffic numbers. The next slide actually goes into that a little bit more. And what we did is we decided to do a scorecard here, and I'm going to explain this very quickly. But we took in data from a top brand and a bottom brand in a segment, and we looked at their sales and traffic as well as their management turnover. And then we also looked at what we collect on White Box, which is how are consumers going to impact this. So what are consumers feeling about it, and how are they rating it all? Huge differences here in sales and traffic, 12.2 and 11%. I'm sure everyone would love that list. And we're seeing it better than management and worse than management. So all of this impacts, and I think we sometimes look at it as just we're looking at our within our four walls, but what happens with management turnover and what happens with training impacts sales and traffic, and also impacts what the consumers are feeling about your brand. And it all kind of is a snowball effect. So, you know, the piece to kind of walk away with this is that, you know, there are best-in-class performers. There's those that are doing it and doing it really well despite what we're seeing in the economy. And a lot of those are the companies that are investing in the people side of their business.
Pretty powerful information when you throw in consumer perspective. So I think that's good. I think, you know, the key takeaway for me from all this is, as an industry, we really have to be careful of that, walking that fine line, being proactive versus reactive. You know, and Melissa, I think you said it is, you know, we can't overly respond to initial data and live quarter by quarter, even though all of us who have grown up in this industry know you manage labor by the hour, and, you know, but we have to kind of keep a steady pace and a steady course when it comes to our employees, because when the economy does shift, we can shift with it and take advantage of those guests that walk in and get that response from that says this is a great brand to participate in, versus have to catch up in 3 to 6 months when we hire that staff to fill in. So, you know, if you walk away from this call, use data to support your arguments, and then looking at the fact that we have to kind of stay the course no matter what the peaks and valleys are. On behalf of my team here, myself, Jen, and Melissa, we want to thank you for your time. Very much appreciate all of you that were asking questions throughout the session. That was very helpful for us to help tie back into the specific slide that we were working on. Hopefully we answered all your questions. If we did not, we apologize for that. In addition, we want to let you know that you have an opportunity coming up in March. TDN2K and Chart will be partnering again on their trainer survey. So this, you know, keep an eye out for the announcements from Chart. We look forward to having as many, if not all of you, participate in that survey. So we'll have even more current and up-to-date data to share with you at upcoming conferences. With that, I'll turn it over to Jen or Melissa for any last comments that you have.
Just for me, again, thank you so much, and it's great having everybody here on the call. Great participation, and I think that the lesson here is to do more with less, and to really communicate well with the people that you have out there in the field. Melissa?
I totally agree. Happy holidays to all of you guys, because we are in December. Don't be too nervous about 2017. I think we're going to be okay. It's going to be an interesting ride, but we're all in this together. And if I've learned anything through the chart community, you know, we all band together here, and we'll continue to share the knowledge and best practices in 2017. I wish you all the best in 2017, and please participate in March.
Thank you, Kurt, Jen, and Melissa. Just a reminder to everyone that this entire webinar was recorded, the slides and the audio, and will be available on the chart website to anyone later today. Thank you, everyone. Hope to see you at the next chart webinar in 2 months.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.